If you don't know who I am, and if my slide clicker will work here, I'll introduce myself. There we go. I'm Michael Allen. I also go by White Rhino. I got my handle down here at the bottom. If you want to check out my social medias, I'll be posting these slides online later if you're interested in any of the links and stuff that I got in the slides. I work for Black Hills Information Security, where I'm a red team practice lead, and I also currently act as an initial access specialist on our anti-SOC continuous pen testing team. So basically, my day-to-day job is doing initial access attacks against red team customers and continuous pen testing customers to try and break into those environments over the internet. As a result of that, I also teach, I've got a link to my class here, Red Team Initial Access, and the attack I'm going to be talking about today comes straight out of that class content and out of the attacks I've been doing lately on these different kinds of projects. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this new attack that I've been doing that's been having really good success, how this attack was developed, and also what can be done to defend against this attack today. And before I do that, to lead into it, let me start out by giving you kind of some backstory and talking about some of the hurdles that we run into as modern attackers these days, as red teamers and pen testers, to get into modern environments. So back in what I call the good old days for us attackers, back in the time whenever I first started pen testing, I've been doing this for about 10.5 years now. So back then, whenever we do a red team exercise, we do a pen test, we had a lot less to contend with than we do today. Email defenses, for example, were very minimal if they were present at all in the environment. It might be very simple filtering, if anything like that. So it was very easy for us to get emails to land in inboxes back then. Along those same lines, it was very easy for us to get code to execute on an endpoint or a workstation back then. We weren't really up against any kind of EDR products in the way that we think of them today, those endpoint defense and response products. Basically just your basic antivirus, so we could get around with tools you just download straight off the internet and need no modification at all or anything like that. Stuff like Metasploit, we could download and just generate a payload and get execution on the machine. In terms of getting the end users to execute those payloads back then, that was much easier too, because most end users had not gotten like regular security awareness training the way that they get it today. They were not receiving the quarterly or annual phishing campaigns that most organizations do. A lot of organizations hadn't started doing that kind of thing yet. So a lot of end users didn't know terms like social engineering or phishing, and it was much easier to say, call someone up and get a username and password, or send them an email and get them to run something on their computer. And even the people who are running the networks in those environments, like the IT people, the security team, if they had one, often didn't know a whole lot about what was in their own environment. It was very, very common that myself or other testers on our team would start a test on Monday and go into the environment with no knowledge about what we were going to encounter in there, anything about it at all. On Friday, we would end the test and we'd actually know more about that environment, the network topology, the devices and services and things like that that were out there than the people running the network would. So it's very common during a debriefing call that I'd be talking to someone, telling them about the vulnerabilities that we exploited, the devices we found on the network, and they didn't even realize some of this stuff was out there. So to make a long story short, back then the defenders were really operating blind. And this was, as you can imagine, great for us as attackers. It's that's a huge advantage for us to have. Now contrast that with today. This slide here shows multiple layers of security. All of this I expect to encounter when I'm starting any red team exercise these days, when I'm trying to break into an organization's environment. In fact, there's more than this that I actually expect, but this is kind of a summary that will make sense for the purposes of this conversation. And I'll go through this with you. So these days, when I'm trying to do an attack against an environment, let's say it's a social engineering attack, for example, the first defense that I'm going to have to encounter, that first layer of security, is going to be the layer around the communication channels. So taking email as the example. Back in the old days, it was not well defended. These days, email has multiple layers of security typically. It's actually very difficult for us to get emails to land in inboxes reliably. Phishing emails land in inboxes all the time still, but that's just because attackers are sending out so many of them. But for us to be able to do it reliably in a short period of time in a well-secured environment, which is our typical red team customer, pretty difficult. So we turn to other channels, but these days defenses are available for the other channels as well. So to use another example, a bit more modern example, the chat messages, things like Microsoft Teams or Slack are two channels that we often use for phishing attacks. And we can usually get this to work once or twice against a given organization. But after they've had a red team exercise from us once and they've seen us do this attack, it usually doesn't work again because they have the ability to just flip a switch and turn off external messages coming from outside senders, and we can no longer send those phishing messages. So I expect that the communication channels of any kind are going to be pretty well locked down these days, much more than in the past. Now, if I am able to actually get a message into the environment and to the end user, the next layer of security I've got to contend with is the security awareness of the user themselves. So of those end users, they're all being trained these days typically to watch out for things like email messages, chat messages, text messages, phone calls, all that stuff. It's all covered in security awareness training. And most organizations are doing annual or quarterly phishing exercises where they actually put the users to the test. In addition to watching out for those communications, the things that we normally use for payloads, the users are also being taught to scrutinize things like attachments or file downloads and URLs. So they're being taught to look for suspicious or unusual domains in the URLs. They're being taught to scrutinize maybe file extensions that they don't recognize, those kind of things. Now, if I can get past that layer of security, there's still the next layer of security, which is the defenses on the endpoint. So those EDR products that I mentioned on the last slide, these are a real pain in the butt. For most attackers out there, this is where they are probably spending most of their time trying to get around defenses and things like that. And this is the first thing that's going to come to mind, because EDR products are very advanced these days. They often have AI integrated in them. They often have sandboxing capabilities where they can do a thorough analysis of any payloads we send into the environment. And even if we can get the code execution, that initial code execution to happen, the post-exploitation actions that we take after we get code execution can still get us caught. So if I make one mistake on that endpoint after getting code execution, because of the detections and the alerts that are out there, it's typically very easy for the defenders to lock down and isolate that workstation and remove my access to it, to investigate what I was doing, and then take away all access to the network. So huge defense, huge hurdle here for us to try and get around. If I can get around that, I've still got to contend with the defenses on the network, with things like the egress controls, blocking what protocols and ports I can use, blocking what hosts I can talk to on the internet. It's often reputation-based, so a lot of times traffic can only go to servers that are already trusted on the internet. I can't just use some random server on the internet. And even the ability to decrypt my traffic. So before it was possible for me to encrypt traffic and hide all my C2 traffic that way, but these days it can be decrypted, it can be analyzed, and that can give me away. Now there's one last layer of security down here, which is the external access controls. If I want to log into someone's account, let's say I've got username and password, that also is no longer enough for me to get into an organization typically anymore because of things like multi-factor authentication. So I have to have that person's token in addition to having their username and password. And I've also got to get around things like the geolocation-based defenses, like impossible travel alerts that would alert the blue team to a suspicious login from an unusual location. So this is a lot. This is a lot for us to contend with these days as red teamers. And behind every one of these defenses that I've just mentioned is a whole team of people that's building that product or service, putting a ton of resources into keeping people like myself out of the environment. So there's just a huge amount of resources going into this. And we compare that with the resources we have on a red team, maybe a couple of people like myself for 3 to 5 weeks typically on one of our red teams at BHIS. And this is just massively in favor of the defenders these days. And it does not make any sense at all for us to try and go head-to-head with this as red teamers or as attackers. This is not a situation like a couple of boxers in a ring where in a boxing match, we've got weight classes because we don't want to have one boxer that's 100 pounds heavier than another boxer where they're just going to clobber the other person. We want to see a fair fight. We want to see who's got the best skills, that kind of thing. But this is not that situation. And actually, we as red teamers want the situation to be the same as real world attackers want it to be, which is where actually we have the massive advantage. So we want that situation where one side massively has the advantage over the other side, but we want it to be us instead of the other side. So how do we make that happen? The way that I like to try and make that happen is to start thinking outside the box. So it was about 1.5 years ago now that I was starting a red team exercise with another tester at BHIS. It was for a new customer, and we were thinking to ourselves, we're like, how are we going to reliably get around all those defenses that I just described to you? How are we going to come up with some kind of new attack or something that will get around those defenses? And it was during that time of brainstorming that I came up with these three kind of principles that you see here on screen. Attack where your opponent is weakest, be in the place your opponent cannot see, do what your opponent does not expect. And these three things, these three principles, these have really guided my thinking ever since when trying to come up with new attacks, but they're really honestly common sense. This is not like rocket science or anything. Whenever you think of it from the perspective of the attacker, obviously, if you attack the place that's weakest, you're going to have the best chance of success. Obviously, if you're in a place where you can't be seen, you're not going to be detected. Obviously, if you do something unexpected, you'll have the advantage of surprise. So this was what was really guiding my thinking at that time. And I put this into action just by asking a few questions. So the first question I asked was, where are the defensive strongholds? Where are the places that I really expect a very strong defense to be, that I don't really want to contend with that defense? And not even necessarily where I expect it to be, but where it can it be? Because when we're going into an organization, going into a situation for the first time, we don't really know a lot about that organization. We don't know for sure what defenses will or won't be in place there. But I want to know, what could be in place there. So pretty much everything that I mentioned on the earlier slide is in this list. And I've got these all marked in red because these are all defensive strongholds for the reasons that I laid out, except for, and this might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, the external access controls down here. So while the rest of these are kind of a red color, this is more of a purple color, or at least it's intended to be a purple color. With the external access controls, the things like multi-factor authentication and geolocation, those controls, I actually have some tools and techniques that I feel very confident I will be able to get around those controls these days. So this is where I feel like I have an advantage. Every one of the other areas, I feel like I have a pretty massive disadvantage. So then the next thing I do is I ask the opposite question. Instead of asking where are the defensive strongholds, now I ask where are the places that are undefended, invisible, I will be invisible, and where I will be unexpected. And I just apply those questions to every one of these layers of security to start coming up with some answers. So for the communication channels, for example, I asked myself, okay, where's the communication channel where I could communicate with the end user where the organization would not have the ability to defend? Because I don't want to leave this to chance. I don't want to just say, I don't think they have that. I want it to be, they don't have the ability to defend. Well, there are actually many answers to this question, but the one that I came up with and the one that applies for the purpose of this talk is physical mail that's coming to the person's home address. For that communication channel, they're not going to have any ability whatsoever for just about every organization to defend that. Maybe an intelligence agency or some kind of government or military agency or something like that. But for most places, they're not going to have any ability whatsoever to have any influence on mail coming to a person's house. So I say, okay, that sounds good. That sounds like I got a good advantage there. How about for the security awareness layer? Where is a communication channel that the user is not being trained to watch out for and that they will not be expecting? And again, that same channel of physical mail coming to the person's home address comes up again. And that sounds like a pretty good situation, because most of the security awareness training that I've seen, it doesn't cover physical mail coming to your home address, especially not in the context of work. And when people are at home, they're usually in a home state of mind. They're not really in a work state of mind. When you're in a work state of mind, you're thinking, I might get that quarterly phishing email or whatever it is today. But when you're at home, you're thinking, what's on the TV or what am I going to do later? That kind of thing. Not thinking about security awareness so much. So this, again, seems pretty good. Well, how about the payload that I'm going to use with it? We talked about how the users can scrutinize URLs and attachments. What's something that maybe the user hasn't been trained how to scrutinize or that they don't have the ability to scrutinize? Well, for that, maybe a QR code would fit well, because a QR code, unlike a URL or a file name, cannot just be scrutinized just by looking at it. I have yet to meet a person who can look at a QR code and tell me what's in that QR code just by looking at it. I'm sure there's probably somebody out there, but I haven't met them yet, and they're not my typical target. So QR code sounds pretty good to me. In fact, to see what's in the QR code, the person has to first scan it with a device. So that's actually halfway to what I want, because what I want is I want them to scan it with a device and then tap OK or open or whatever to do that next step. So that seems actually pretty good. Okay, so how about the defenses on the endpoint? Where might be undefended by those defenses on the endpoint? Well, the answer to this is actually in the name, the defenses on the endpoint. So if I just move off the endpoint, then those defenses are still over there on the endpoint, and I'm now operating over here where I don't have to encounter those defenses at all. So where might I be able to do that? How about the person's personal device? Maybe their personal web browser on their personal device, like their personal phone. For most organizations, it's going to be completely impossible for them to defend or monitor a personal browser on a personal phone. Okay, so moving on to the network defenses. Where might I be able to avoid those? Well, again, the answer is in the name. The network defenses are on the network. So if I can move off the network, all those thousands and thousands of dollars of network defenses will still be over there on the network, and I'll be just fine over here. So where else might I be able to operate? How about the person's home internet connection? Or maybe their mobile device internet connection from their mobile provider? Either one of those, again, pretty much impossible for the organization to defend or to monitor. And then finally, getting to that last layer of security, the external access controls. Again, I feel pretty good about those, so I'm not worried about them right now. So now we've got a picture being painted just by asking some questions of, areas where we might have a huge advantage. And just by going through this process, you can already see where this story is going. Like, you can get an idea of what's going to happen. Let me get some more water. So from going through this process, this brainstorming, a new attack was born. I'm going to show you what this new attack looked like. This is it right here. It's just a plain white envelope. It shows up in a person's mailbox at their home. It's got, in this case, it's got the name of our victim on it. It's always got the name of the victim on it, but our victim, in this case, is Alice Smith. So this is a fictitious person, just for the purpose of this example. Alice works for a fictitious company, Contoso Limited, whose name and address you see up in the top left corner. Again, fictitious. This is the fictitious company that Microsoft uses in all of their demos and training and things like that. I didn't want to put a photo of one of these that I've actually sent to one of our customers here because I didn't want to call out any customers or any other companies in the world, so we're using fictitious names here. But the main point here is that up in that return address field, I'm putting the name and the address, the real name and the real address of this person's employer, so that it looks like this envelope comes from their employer when they see it in their mailbox. Because if this doesn't get delivered for some stupid reason, I don't really care about getting it back. I just care that it looks good whenever it gets received by the recipient. So that's what it looks like when it shows up in someone's mailbox. Hopefully what happens is Alice is at home. She goes out to check the mail. She sees this envelope. She says, wonder what I got from work. And then she opens it up because there's nothing on the outside here that is making this look, obviously like it's not from her workplace at all. So on the inside of this envelope, she finds a postcard. And on this postcard, this is the front of the postcard, we've got a nice high resolution stock photo over here on the right, this lady smiling. Over there on the left, we've got some big bold text that sounds really cheesy. You are amazing, like it could have been written by somebody in an HR department. And then down at the bottom left, we got the Contoso logo down there, the logo of her company. So we're doing a few different things here. We are immediately having that company logo displayed there very clearly so that we're establishing a sense of authority because this is coming from her employer. We're establishing a sense of tribe because we got the company logo there. It's a symbol of her tribe. We've got some nice, pleasant text here. I've also tried to color coordinate, make this look as much as possible like it was like actually professionally printed by some printing service that the company would use. I always try and do that and make this look as just as crisp and clear as possible. So hopefully we're enticing some more curiosity, some oh, what's this? And she flips it over on the back, sees the company logo up there again. Now sees the Amazon logo down there at the bottom left. That's kind of interesting. We got a QR code over on the left. That's not terribly suspicious at this point because we see those everywhere. We see them, you go to a restaurant, you want to look at the menu. Sometimes they have a QR code. Sometimes you go to a parking space, you got to pay for your parking. There's a QR code. So nothing to worry about there. Then over here on the right, we've got a letter that's addressed to Alice by name. I always address the person, by their name, customize it and personalize it for them. So I'll read you this letter. It says, "Dear Alice, it's my pleasure to inform you that a teammate recently nominated you for a peer recognition award. On behalf of our Contoso family, please accept this $50 Amazon gift card as a small token of our appreciation for you and all the hard work you do. Sincerely, Carol Roberts, Chief Human Resources Officer." And then down at the bottom, we've got some gift card instructions. Use your phone to scan the QR code on the left and sign in with your Contoso email to claim your electronic gift card. And one thing that I'll point out here is this is the real name of the person's Chief Human Resources Officer as well. This is really easy information to get. I just go out on a website like RocketReach or any of 1,000 other websites on the internet, type in the company name, and I get the head of HR and their title, and I can put that right there on the card, and I always do that as well. So now what's happened? Now Alice has looked at this card. She says, "Oh, this is awesome." She's feeling all these feelings of excitement, of happiness. of appreciation for from her company, of acceptance, being a valued member of the team, and she's getting $50. So this is a very pleasant surprise for her. And if we think about the situation that she's in right now, she just took this out of her mailbox at home. So we know she's at home, and she's about to scan that QR code with her phone. So since she's at home, we know that phone is either connected to her home internet or her mobile internet. It's not connected to the company network. So all those company defenses on the network and on the endpoint are not anything we have to worry about at this point. So hopefully Alice now scans that QR code over there on the left to get that gift card. And the next thing that she sees is this single sign-on page. In this case, Alice's company uses Microsoft 365. This could just as easily be Okta, Duo, any other single sign-on portal that you can think of. There is one clue right here that an attack is happening, and that is the domain that you see up at the top of this screenshot on the left, the login-contoso.com. When we do this attack, I try and pick a domain that looks as much as possible like the organization's real single sign-on portal, or something that matches the ruse, something like peer recognition award or whatever that would fit in. But we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that the victim does not see that domain, no matter how good we make it look. A few things that I'll do are I will not put that domain in the QR code. I will instead use some kind of redirector, like maybe a URL shortening service. So when she scans the QR code, she maybe sees like a bit.ly URL. And that way, that's not suspicious. That's something we see all the time in QR codes, but now she doesn't actually see where it's really going. And then when the page opens, there are things we can do to try and hide that address bar. So that way she has to actually swipe down in order to get the address bar to appear. So it's not going to be obvious that this is on some other domain unless she actually takes those extra steps. So this is her one chance really to see that there's an attack going on here. And is she going to take those extra steps? Does she know to do that? And is she going to be able to overcome her excitement in order to do that? For a lot of users, the answer is going to be no. So this is, again, very advantageous for us as attackers. Now, this is her real single sign-on portal. Again, her company uses Microsoft 365. Other companies might use others. But the reason I say this is her real single sign-on portal is because we're doing what's called an adversary in the middle attack here. We're running a server out on the internet. In this case, it's the Evil Jinx server. I've got it linked here on the slide. This is a completely free tool. They've also got a paid version, but this is a free tool that just anybody can go and download on the internet. And our server runs out on the internet. Her device, after scanning that QR code, browses to our server. And when that happens, our server goes out and connects to her real single sign-on portal and downloads the web page. And that's the web page that you see there that's asking for email address, whatever her user ID is. That page is then displayed to her mobile device, and she enters her user ID, and that's sent to our adversary in the middle server. Our server captures that and sends it on to the single sign-on portal. Now the single sign-on portal sends back the prompt for her password. That page is sent to her device. She enters her password. The password is captured by our adversary in the middle server, and that's sent back to the single sign-on portal. Now what happens? The single sign-on portal asks for that multi-factor token. In this case, in this example here, it's asking for a code. This is the kind of code that you would get from like an authenticator app. Could be Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Okta, Duo, whatever. It could also be a code that you get from an SMS text message. It could be a code you get from a phone call. It could be a phone call where you have to press a button in order to continue the authentication. It could be a push notification that comes to your phone where you have to tap approve or deny, and you tap approve to complete the authentication. It could even be the extra complicated looking one that Microsoft likes to do, where it shows you 2 digits on the screen, and you have to type in the 2 digits, and then you have to accept the push notification. Any of those will be vulnerable to this attack. And when Alice completes that multi-factor authentication, that will be sent to the server. And the next thing the server will do, the real single sign-on portal, is it will issue a session token. And that session token will be captured by our adversary in the middle server. And that session token is important because the session token is how every web application on the internet works. When you log into a web application, the next thing that happens after you've entered your username, your password, your multi-factor, is the application issues a token, usually a cookie, that is saved by your browser, and then that cookie is sent in every single request that you make to the application while you're logged in. So this is why you don't have to put in your username and password every single time you send an email on Gmail or open up another email or whatever it might be. It's because that cookie is being sent in the background that is identifying you to the web server and telling it this is the person that's logged in, they have access to use this account. So now that we have that session token, we can take that token, we can put it right in our own browser, and we can jump straight into Alice's account and start running amok in this environment. We've got a whole post-exploitation process You'd be probably amazed by how much access and things we can do with just what we get from this. But the next thing that happens for Alice is our adversary in the middle server now sends her to a different page. It sends her to a page that looks like this, where she receives the code for an Amazon gift card. And this is my very favorite part of this entire attack, because this is where I get to pay off the person for giving me access to their environment. I actually give Alice a real $50 Amazon gift card here. So she gets the code for that real $50 Amazon gift card. She goes, puts it in her account, and now she can go buy whatever she wants. Now we've given her some positive reinforcement for those actions she just did for us. We're making her feel good. She believes this whole thing was 100% legit, because the one thing that she's learned from all those quarterly or annual phishing campaigns that they do at work is attackers never make good on their promises. All those emails that she got before, they all had empty promises. You'll be entered in a drawing to win or whatever. And then you never ever get it. Nobody in the company ever gets it, that kind of thing. But by getting what we promised, she actually now believes that this was completely legit. Imagine what would happen if I put a fake Amazon gift card code on this page. The next thing that'll happen is she'll try and enter it on her Amazon account. It won't work. So she'll call up the HR person whose name I put on the postcard. She's going to say, hey, thank you very much for the award, but that gift card code didn't work. Can you help me with that? And yes, exactly. The HR person will say, what gift card? And they're going to go back and forth for just a minute until one of them realizes there was a scam that just took place, and they're going to get security involved. Security will then lock down Alice's account and they'll kick us out of the environment. We don't want that. So $50 is a really small price to pay to have not only access to one of the biggest companies in the country or the world, but access where no one's trying to hunt us down afterward. We have free run of the place because no one knows that an attack just happened. This has been just massively successful for us. It's really been ridiculous how well this works. Everybody really wants that gift card. So I do, yes. Yep, I absolutely do. So yeah, this has been working really great for us. But the one thing you might be thinking right now is, okay, that's all well and good. When we do email phishing, it's really easy to get someone's email address. How do you get their home address to do this attack in the first place? And this is something that I was wondering too whenever we first did this attack. Fortunately, I was on the red team exercise with another tester who introduced me to this resource that you see over here on the right, fastpeoplesearch.com, which I have learned is actually extremely reliable. So this is my entire process for getting people's addresses, finding targets for this attack in one slide. And this has been extraordinarily reliable, like ridiculously, you wouldn't believe how reliable this has been. So all I do to get targets for this attack is I go on LinkedIn, I find the company, I click on the company page, and I click on the People tab on the company page, and I start scrolling through all their employees. I look for people with a title that it makes me think, oh, I want to attack this person with this attack. Then next, I click on that person's profile, and I see a page like what you see over there on the left with Alice's fictitious profile page, where it's got the person's name, their title, and their location. Just about everybody on LinkedIn has their location listed, their city and state. With that name and that location, I can now go on a free website like fastpeoplesearch.com, put in the name and location, and I'll get back results like you see over here on the right. What I really hope to get is what you see here, one free public record found for this person. If I find one free public record in that search, that's a very strong indicator that I've got the right person, because there's only one person with that name that lives in that town. If I get two, a lot of times I can narrow it down based on clues that are in the output, like age and things like that. If I get more than that, it's not really a big deal. I can just go on to the next person, because I don't have to have very many targets for this attack to work. In fact, I intentionally limit the number of targets that I do with this attack. I only ever target 10 people for any company that I'm ever targeting, and that works great. I've actually got into every company that I've personally done this against, just targeting 10 people. Now, I did try doing more once. Actually, last summer for our continuous pen testing customers, I was doing this attack for them for the first time. I really wanted to do a good job and impress them. So I said, I'm going to do 20 employees for every one of those companies. It was still not difficult at all to get the addresses of 20 employees. But I was a victim of my own success whenever I did that. I sent out 20 postcards to every company and had so many people logging in that I had to have all hands on deck from our continuous pen testing team. All the other testers had to jump in and help me to do interesting things with the accounts, get persistence and post-exploitation and stuff like that, because I was just overwhelmed and could not operate fast enough with all the access I was getting. So never again. From now on, I always only do 10.
When that happens, how many times do you actually get farming without nothing, you have to get everybody. I mean, you got access.
Sure.
Did anybody got to stick and be like, oh?
Not from the initial attack. There were things that we did during post-exploitation for some of the companies that did result in that. But yeah, not for the initial attack. Go ahead. That is absolutely true too. Well, and not just that, but the higher the number, the more gift cards I got to buy too. So yeah, so I got to kind of limit it. Yeah, go ahead. That's a very good question. Fortunately, this has a little bit of like guardrails built into it. So if the sign-in portal that I am targeting is one that only employees can log into in whatever case. So if it happens to be one that like more than just employees could log into, then we will build in some guardrails on our landing page just to make sure they have to put in an email address that's for that company. So that way, there's no way that someone could sign in with a personal account. And that way I'm 100% sure that no one outside that company is going to, or even an employee of the company is going to sign in with a personal account. And we're going to compromise anybody's personal credentials or account or anything like that. It also ensures that nobody that's not an intended target gets a gift card. So yeah, so there we are as far as how we get the targets. So hopefully at this point, I have kind of painted a rather bleak picture for all of you, or for any defenders that are in the room, at least as far as I've designed an attack that intentionally avoids all the defenses that are out there, or almost all the defenses, and also designed it in such a way that's very enticing to the end user. So how in the world do we defend against this? Fortunately, there are defenses that you can use against this, and it's just a two-step process to defend against this attack. It's not necessarily going to be an easy process. There will be some work involved, but it is a doable process. So I'll share that with you now. The first step is going to be securing our humans, and we'll do that through security awareness training. So first off, the first thing I want to point out here as I talk about security awareness is the importance of security awareness training. I've heard many people, both in person and on the internet, talk about how security awareness training is a waste of time and resources because they say anyone can be fooled. You know, attackers are constantly going to come up with new attacks that trick people into doing things they're not supposed to do. So it's just a waste of time to try and train people. But I want to say up front that I believe that's completely false. I think that security awareness training is extremely important. And the biggest reason that I think that and that this attack demonstrates that is because creative attackers will always be able to create brand new attacks that have not been seen before, that defenders have not yet figured out ways to defend against, that they haven't set up defenses for, that they may just be outside their ability to defend. And in those situations, the security awareness training might not just be the first line of defense, it might be literally the only line of defense, as it was for many of the organizations that I ran this attack against. So security awareness training is extremely important, not only for that reason, but also as a side effect that the security awareness training that we provide at work also secures people in their homes. Because a lot of times for your home accounts, for your family accounts and things like that, that security awareness is really the only thing standing between your personal resources and accounts and the attackers, because we don't have the benefit of all those defenses that we have in the workplace. So security awareness training, extremely important. So the second point I want to make about it is, okay, then if it's so important, how do we make it effective? And I've got 3 points here about how to make our security awareness program effective. The first is to train principles and concepts that can apply in a variety of situations so that we train a mindset and not just really specific nitty-gritty details, kind of like, if you see this in an email, here's how you check and see where that link goes and that kind of thing, which is applicable to a single situation, but may not transfer over into other situations. So we want to teach a mindset that a user can apply in a variety of situations, including situations they have not seen yet. And then the second point here is that we should practice. And most organizations are already doing that with their quarterly or annual phishing campaigns, but rather than just practicing over a single channel, we need to practice over multiple channels, especially channels that the user has never seen before. We want to train them to expect the unexpected. So train over email, train over chat messages, text messages, phone calls, social media, physical mail, any other channel you can think of, any other channel that you have at your disposal, because the key is to get them thinking to expect the unexpected. We don't want users getting tunnel vision where they just see malicious email, see malicious email, see malicious email. They expect the attack is always going to come from malicious email, and they miss everything else out here that it could come from. And then the third point is to use positive reinforcement to reward good behavior and not punish bad behavior, not use negative reinforcement. And there are a few reasons for this. I mean, it's a really kind of a feel-good point that I got up here. It makes people feel good. Those end users, when they're not getting punished, when they're getting rewarded instead. But there's a practical reason. And that is because using negative reinforcement, punishing behaviors that we don't want, actually creates an incentive for users to hide the fact that they have made a mistake. And anyone can make a mistake. And when people make a mistake, like they open an email that they shouldn't have opened, what we don't want to have happen is we don't want them to say, if I tell someone that I opened that email, I might get punished, I might not get that bonus or whatever it was that I wanted. I'm just gonna be quiet about it and see what happens. We don't want that to happen. Instead, what we want to happen is we want them to say, I made a mistake, but I know that if I report this, I'm going to be seen as the hero because I reported it, I'm part of the security program. And if they are celebrated as the hero for those situations rather than treated as the villain or the victim, then they will be much more likely to be an active part of the security program and to report those things. So I absolutely recommend that. It would be a good idea to send them an Amazon gift card, yeah. There should be at least equal incentives for being part of the problem, part of the solution and not part of the problem. Okay, so that second line of defense now we've got is the technical defenses, securing the machines. Now I've got 2 points up here in green at the top of this slide. Either one of these two, number 1 or number 2, will 100% completely defeat adversary in the middle phishing attacks at a technical level where this attack will not work. That is to either switch to phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. That's multi-factor authentication that's based on standards like FIDO2, also U2F or web authentication or 2 other similar standards. And I've got a link to that there on the slides, a document that explains those in a bit more detail if you're interested in that. Or if you can't do that for some reason, to allow logins only from the internal network or VPN. If the logins are only coming from the internal network and the VPN that are being allowed and no other logins are allowed, that will also kill this attack at a technical level. Now, if either one of these are too costly for you to roll out to your entire workforce, one thing that you can do is just apply them to your high-risk users first, people like admins, executives, basically the people who, if their account was compromised, it would be a really bad day and not just a bad day. Now, there are other defenses out there that will help with this a little bit, that will help to detect it and that kind of thing. Down here in this kind of reddish color. These, I do recommend that you have these because they just make your whole security posture that much more robust, but these will not solve the problem. And a lot of times you'll hear these kind of advertised as a solution to the problem. Things like impossible travel alerts, alerts on logins from suspicious IP addresses or suspicious devices, or even canary tokens on your login portal, which I think is a super cool and creative attempted solution to this problem. So much so that I've got links here in the slides, but none of these actually solves the problem. And in fact, half the adversary in the middle tools that are out there that are publicly available on the internet get around half of these defenses by default. And I teach how to get past every one of these in my red team class, and it's not difficult. It's pretty easy. So I don't recommend these as a solution. The real solutions are the 2 that are up here in green. Okay, so all of that having been said, how can we now apply what we've learned here today? I've got some takeaways for you. First up, for the attackers out there, if I got any fellow red teamers or pen testers in the audience, my first step for you to apply what you've learned here today is on your next project, give the postcard phishing attack a try, because it has been massively, like ridiculously, I'm just still surprised by how successful this has been. This has actually been the most successful, go ahead, yeah. Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with somebody about that last night. When it comes to red teams, a lot of times on the rules of engagement call, I'll specifically not mention this. And I'll just wait and see. Yeah, if it's not explicitly like they don't tell me right up front to not do it, then I'll still do it. So Yeah, I've had experiences where customers, if I did mention it on the rules of engagement call, they'd be like, no, don't do that. So as a result, yes. So yeah, exactly. I mean, it works great. And the second point about doing this attack, the reason I want to share it with everybody is I want it to stop working. Like the more we do this attack, if we make this as common as email phishing, and users get used to seeing this kind of thing, then they will learn safely in a pen test or red team environment that this is a risk. This is something that can happen. So hopefully, pen testers and red teamers can start doing this enough that it will become ingrained in security awareness training and something that people have encountered and will stop working before real world attackers really start catching on to it. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, there are similar attacks that I'm aware of, but I literally just made this up. So,
But yeah, there's actually attacks coming on the mail, and I actually recently got the mail
nice.
phishing letter in my house that no, well, it was not actually but yeah, it was the old style like, hey, by the way, someone that is a family member died. That's it.
Yes, yeah.
That's the same type of mentality.
Sure, go ahead.
Fly.
Oh no, I use a print-on-demand company on the internet. It's called Postable, I think. That they like you give them a list of names and addresses, and they print the postcards and mail them and everything. So it's super low effort. So with it being inside the envelope, no one's going to scan the QR code on the in transit. So oh, the return address, it doesn't end up mattering. It's like they don't check that or anything. It's just yeah, you could technically leave it blank. It doesn't, as long as they don't try and return the mail, which if they do try and return it, what's going to happen? It's going to get returned to the office address. It very well might get delivered to that person at the office. So, yeah, I don't actually know what's ever happened to any of them that have been returned in real life. Fortunately, it's not been something that's affected the attack at all yet. Yes, there are clues that can show up. Fortunately for us in a red team context, it really doesn't matter too much. But yes, certainly, especially like from a forensic perspective, if you were doing this attack as like a real attacker, there's all kinds of stuff related to the post office. Yep, go ahead. Oh yeah, like that test I mentioned that happened last summer, where I got way too many results. That went on for 2 months after the test was over. We just had to shut down the adversary in the middle server, and we just had to call it quits. Like this was after the organizations had sent out emails to their employees saying this is a phishing attack, do not do it, and they had posted a picture of the postcard on their intranet website and said, do not do this, it's a phish. And we still had people logging in. We had people, it was crazy. People would log in after this was over, they wouldn't get the gift card. So they would then go to their real company login portal, change their password, and then log in with their new password, trying to get that gift card. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, every single time that happened, we had to send like an update that was like, we got another set of credentials. We didn't, make it sound as bad as I just made it sound describing it. But yeah, every single time we reach out and say, yeah, we got more credentials. People are still logging in.
When you actually say you don't make sure different isn't that you socially get the company that you are do business with and might be seen as unethical?
I wouldn't say, you mean like whenever I don't tell them up front that I'm going to do this?
I mean, yeah, because I give you information, but I never say this is yeah, that's like on their personal.
Right. It's not out of scope, and we're not attacking any personal assets or resources. So it's a company credentials they're logging in with. It's the company account that's being compromised. So there's not any like compromise of any personal stuff that's happening there. So we're staying completely inside the scope. It's just that like the only reason that I might not mention it on the call is because they're going to be skittish about it, but it's still in scope. Go ahead.
If we're doing like listy drops, it's not actually pretty clear. It's like, hey, I've tested that.
Yes.
Like, I can get into the network and this is now what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Into a top five.
So there were a couple of customers in that one from last summer that said, we don't want to do the full thing, but just send us a couple of postcards and we'll have people log in with like some accounts that we know are going to log in and just test and see if it works. And actually, I've got something I'll share with you on the next slide that's another way of testing to see if this works. So second point here for the attackers, and then I'll get to the ones for the defenders. For the attackers, just always remember number 2 here on your future projects, always be cheating. Try and apply those principles that I laid out earlier wherever you can, because we always want to give ourselves a massive advantage. One thing I teach in the red team class is if you're a red teamer, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. It's really our job as red teamers to be operating outside the box, to be cheating all the time, because that's what real world attackers are going to do. And that's how we make the defenders have robust defenses that are defensible against those new novel attacks that we haven't seen yet. Then finally, for the defenders in the audience, to apply what you've learned here today, 4 steps. The first step being, first review your organization's security awareness program and see if it matches up with those points that I laid out earlier. Are you teaching principles and concepts that can be applied in a variety of situations? And are you practicing over a variety of channels so that users are learning to expect the unexpected? And when you do that practice, are you rewarding the behaviors that you want, or are you punishing or shaming the negative behaviors? Because it's so critical that we use positive reinforcement and reward the behaviors that you want. Then after you've done that review of your security awareness program, the second step is review your multi-factor authentication token types that you allow in the organization. Earlier this year, it was like last month or the month before, I did this webcast that you can find out on YouTube. It's on the Black Hills Information Security YouTube channel. I've also got a link to it here in the slides. How to test adversary in the middle without hacking tools. The truth about these tools like Evil Jinx and the other ones that you can download on the internet is they are a huge pain in the butt to set up, even for us that use them every day. I don't want the defenders out there to be limited by having to set up these tools to test their environment. And I also don't want you to have to pay somebody like me to come and test it for you. So I made this webcast. It's a 1-hour webcast that will show you how to actually test all of your multi-factor types to see if they are vulnerable to adversary in the middle without actually having to use any hacking tools. It's actually a pretty simple setup that you can use just to test it and see which ones are vulnerable, which ones are not. And then once you've got that information, now you can start rolling this out and making changes to your organization, like in number 3 here with your short-term goal, to restrict those high-risk accounts like your admins and executives from using the vulnerable multi-factor types. You want to disallow them from using the vulnerable multi-factor types and require them to use stronger multi-factor like the FIDO2 standard. And then finally, once you've done that, then to finally long-term goal, start rolling it out to the rest of your workforce and eventually get everybody on those stronger multi-factor types that are invulnerable to this type of attack, that are resistant to this type of attack. One thing that I'll point out here is it's no longer necessary to do something like buy YubiKeys or something like that for everyone in the organization to have the stronger multi-factor token. You can now do passkeys on a smartphone that are FIDO2 compliant passkeys. It's really cool. They work over Bluetooth or near field communication with the person's computer. It doesn't really cost anything extra other than just the work of setting it up and making sure that your user has a smartphone that's compatible with it. And pretty much any modern smartphone that's up to date. And all of the major multi-factor and single sign-on platforms support this. I know for a fact that Microsoft 365, for example, supports it because I demoed it in that webcast. So this should hopefully become even more and more accessible to even more organizations since the price of doing that deployment has come down. But with that, I'll wrap it up here. Thank you all so very much for listening to me. I got links there on the last bit if you're interested in following online and finding out anything else. And yeah, I'll stick around and answer some questions with whatever time I have, or I'll be also glad to answer questions when I get outside.